Yep. All right, so the trailer we just watched was about the Gallic Wars, and Julius Caesar basically conquered all of Gaul when he was sent out to fight as a general. And basically, that was a big part of Caesar's whole career as a dictator and as a ruler, well, would be ruler of Rome. However, he was assassinated. Julius Caesar really wanted a lot of power. And after he was named dictator for life, people got mad at him and he was assassinated.
其实凯撒的出现并不是一个偶然的现象，没有凯撒的话，也会有其他和他一样的人会出现的。那这个为什么凯撒会出现呢？其实，在布匿战争这个期间就已经埋下了伏笔。
So Caesar would have appeared anyway. Like even if Julius Caesar didn't appear, there would be some other person that was exactly like him. And this was because this occurred right after the Punic Wars, and the after effects of the Roman victory was immense. However, even though they had won, the after effect was not a good thing because, first of all, the Punic War lasted 118 years. The first one lasting 23 years, second one lasting 17 years, and the third one lasting 3 years. However, you may ask, well, that doesn't add up to 118. That adds up not even to half of 118. And here's why. They didn't fight consecutively. And by the Punic Wars, we're talking more of the whole Carthaginian Punic conflict from the beginning of the whole conflict all the way to the fall of Carthage. And because we're talking about their whole conflict, in the middle, it's like an argument and then Rome goes to go get a bag of chips, for example. So basically, during the middle, Rome would sometimes go and fight other wars as well. They weren't going to spend all their time in Carthage. They fought many wars with pirates and also had a war with Macedonia, the kingdom of Alexander, and many, many more. So even though they were mainly fighting Carthage, they weren't all going to use all of their forces on Carthage. So the whole conflict lasted 118 years with the downfall of Carthage being its end. However, Rome has their army is just their citizens. Like when the war comes, they come and fight. They get their own equipment and they fight. So when they come back, well, they have to get a lot of them are left jobless because their jobs are taken by other people back at home while they were outside pillaging and conquering. Even though they may have gotten like a lot of loot, valuables from raiding cities, when the war ended, they probably didn't have much land back at home anymore. And especially the Punic Wars lasted a very long time. And for example, the first one lasting 23 years, if there was any original soldier that were still alive after those 23 years, they probably would have lost their families and their land.
是啊，大家还记得吗？第二次布匿战争仅在汉尼拔的那个手下，仅仅是在坎尼战役，罗马人和他们的这个就是同盟军们就死掉了5到6万，这还是当时的历史学家比较客气的一种描述，实际上可能会更多。所以说，大量的罗马人是在这种长期的征战当中失去了生命。
Yeah, and just that one battle with Hannibal during the Second War, the Battle of Cannae, they had lost over 60,000 people, and that was a lot of people. So Rome was burning out its soldiers. And even though they had won in the end, they were met with a problem, which was the many veteran soldiers and some homeless people who lived in the slum area basically had no money and they had no land to even get a chance to become working members of the society.
对，因为他们就不仅仅只是说他们回来之后 有没有土地的问题，因为所有的将军都会面临一个问题，就是自己的士兵回来之后，然后他们在哪儿给他们弄一块地要给他们。还有一个问题就是他们现在有一些已有的地呢，因为这些很多人他们出去打仗了。古代的就是这些农民，他们工作是非常非常非常辛苦的，不像现在我们有拖拉机啊，有各种各样的现代的农业机械。那古代就是全靠自己在干活，就是基本上只能有身强力壮的男人才能去做。那这些男的都去打仗去了，就只剩下老人和小孩，很多土地就做不了，就荒芜了。那这些土地荒芜的人，他们就变成了 homeless， 然后就要涌到罗马城里头去。
Because, well, like if you live in the countryside or in a smaller city, you might not see many homeless people around, but say go to New York, you'll see lots of them. So the people that didn't have fields anymore, they would go to their crowded in Rome. And that was sort of a problem. So we're going to introduce two brothers who would sort out that, or at least they would try to. So the Gracchus brothers.
不好意思，我再补充2句。像这些，但是他们留下来的地都给谁了呢？就是给那些他们就是那些打了很多胜仗的这些将军、这些贵族们，他们从他们战胜的地方又有很多的奴隶，他们就把这些荒芜的田地买下来，用奴隶来种这些地。那原来罗马就是它的经济结构呢是有大贵族，但是他们也有奴隶，但是他们也有很多就是那些农民耕种自己的土地。那现在这些土地大量的集中在了这些就是贵族手里头，然后农民失去，他们不需要这些农民来跟他耕种地方，那些农民又失去了自己的地，反正就是在城市里面，穷人和富人的矛盾就越来越大了。
So all the land that were not given to the citizens were taken by the warriors, the people that had conquered all of them, like the people that were rich, the aristocrats. They took the land, and they put slaves on there, and so their land was like they had lots of land, but other people just had no land, making basically the land difference between richer and normal people like go way up. Their difference in land was very large.
Yeah.
And so now let's talk about the Gracchus brothers, the two people that tried to actually change this. So they were Tiberius Gracchus, which we did not write here, and Gaius Gracchus. And the reason we didn't write here is because Tiberius Gracchus died much earlier than Gaius Gracchus. Of course, they had caused a very big political war because they wanted the aristocrats and the rich people, the nobles, to give out their extra land to the people that didn't have enough land. However, that was a very unpopular opinion to the senators, and the Senate did not agree, probably because the Senate were also nobles, and they did not feel like sharing land. They wanted it all for themselves. So he didn't have much of a chance at winning this argument. And Tiberius and Gaius were both killed by the Senate later.
对，因为他们的最重要的2个观点，一个就是就是每年要定期给就是罗马的市民们发那种就是有补贴的粮食，还有一个观点就是要把这些贵族，因为罗马本来就规定了一个人他不能拥有过大的土地。他们就想让这些占有了太多土地的人把那些他们多余的土地拿出来，然后分给那些就是没有地的这些 homeless。但是那这些贵族们肯定就不愿意啊，凭什么呀？已经到了手上的东西，他不愿意再给出来了，所以说就导致了很多的一些冲突，然后他们2个人也就是因此吧，就是都被暗杀掉了。据说那个他们俩的妈妈都要哭了，他的哥哥死了，他的弟弟也遭到了大家反对的时候，他妈妈说：“你就不能等我死了才去改变国家的制度吗？你现在这是要伤我的心啊！”但是他也没有听从妈妈的建议。
This So there was actually a rule, like a rule. There was a big rule limiting how much land you could have. And if you had extra land, you can just give it away. But people don't want to do that because people don't go by the rules. And since you already have it, why give it to somebody else? And so because of their unpopular opinion, they were both killed by the Senate, Tiberius first, and then Gaius. This picture is Gaius Gracchus summoned by the Senate, which would soon be like an assassination by Pere Nicholas Brisset, depicting his mother crying, why can't you go and change the politics once I'm dead? Because she couldn't bear the guilt of both of her sons dying. And so after a failed attempt of giving land, they both died, and we are going to go on to the next person. Of course, even though our title of this today says Julius Caesar, we won't be all talking about Julius Caesar. We will also, because we will be continuing from the Punic Wars up till Caesar's death. So there are a lot of stuff that happened in between the Punic Wars and Caesar. So we're going to talk about that first. And that will also influence Caesar a bit as well. So next is Marius. Marius was he was a great general of Rome, and he was also like a normal person. He was not a noble, yet he was a general. He also had a lieutenant, Sulla, which you guys may have heard and may not have heard. Sulla was also a dictator, and he was more on the aristocrat noble side. And they were like two sides of a coin. Marius representing the normal people, the villagers, and Sulla representing the nobles, the Senate, and basically the higher ranks of Rome. So at first they were actually, Sulla was actually Marius's lieutenant, his second in command. However, after a bit, they soon fell apart because their ideals were different. Sulla being a noble and Marius being lower ranking than him. So they soon became enemies, arch nemesis, and here might be like a small reference later on, but they had a fight that was like really similar to what Caesar might have done later on. So Marius was sent out to fight, but there was a civil war in Rome, where Marius was led an army to fight Sulla, who was now put as dictator to fight Marius. However, the Roman armies are supposed to be for Rome, not for a particular general. So they're supposed to be most loyal to Rome and to whoever's in charge of Rome. But this might be the first time that his own soldiers were actually more loyal to him than to the dictator of Rome, Sulla. So when they fought, Marius won, but he later had died much earlier than Sulla did. So
他比苏拉年纪大呀
yeah.
older than Sulla.
And this picture is basically depicting the triumph of Marius by Giovanni Battista Tiepolo.
就像北昆说的那样，马略是一个非常天才的一个将军，他出身于农家，就是家里头挺穷的，然后就慢慢的从那个就是从底层，然后一直靠这种军功一直走到前台的。但是他自己呢就是身先士卒，自己打仗非常的厉害，然后他还进行了很多的军事改革。我们刚才提到就是很多 homeless 在罗马，这些 homeless 呢他是不能参军的，你不能参军呢，你就不能拥有一块土地。就是以前的话，你参军之后，你退伍了之后，然后你的将军啊，就会帮你找一块地方，然后在那块地方会分给你一小块土地。那马略最重大的一个改革就是他允许这些无产者，这些 homeless。叫他们 homeless 合适吗？就是他允许这些没有地产的人去参加军队。 然后这样呢，其实因为罗马老往外头打仗，他们的兵其实早就不够了。马略呢，就是把这些人允许这些无产者，然后加入军队，一下子就把军队的这个一下就解决了2个问题，一个是罗马军队的人不太够了的问题，然后第2个问题就是那些失业者他们老是在这个城市里面晃荡，然后会影响这个城市的治安的问题，他也解决了。
Yeah, so Marius was also a very talented, he was like a prodigy of his time. He built his way up to general using his military achievements, and when he became a general of an army, he solved 2 problems at once, because the main problem with the land thing that the Gracchus brothers tried to solve was that the homeless people weren't allowed to become soldiers, because one of the benefits of becoming a soldier was that once you retire, your general will help you find a patch of land that you can live in and you can farm in and still contribute to the Roman society. However, one thing was that homeless people could not enter the army, which I don't know why they did that. But since Marius allowed the homeless to enter his army, first of all, his army was enlarged because, as you have seen in the Punic War, the Second Punic Wars, they have lost a considerable amount of soldiers. So if they have like a bunch of spare people just sitting there and not doing anything, why not recruit them into the army and they can actually help? So he solved the problem of being short on soldiers and giving the people land, which is a win-win situation.
然后呢，马略，你看进来了这么多士兵，还有一些士兵原来就是一些 homeless， 之前的士兵他都是必须要你家里头有家产，也就是说你可能还是本身受过一点点教育，有一点点就是军事技能的。那现在这些 homeless， 那肯定是素质就是参差不齐的，然后他就对他们进行了训练，他要求士兵人就是平时以前的士兵都是就是那粮食啊什么的都是有专门的部队来处理嘛，他现在是要求士兵们自己背着自己的粮食，然后负重前行，然后还要求这些士兵哪怕不打仗也要进行训练。然后还有就是这些士兵，你看以前的士兵都是自己准备武器，那就是有的人很穷，那他可能就只能准备一根木棍什么的。那他现在呢，马略就给所有的士兵都配备了就是相同的，然后那个武器，然后就是把他们都武装起来了。他的这批部队，然后当时的人管他们叫做马略的骡子，因为他们特别能吃苦，特别的能战斗，而且很服从马略的命令。但是马略就是靠这支部队打败了好多次的这种战争嘛，而且他的士兵们特别的爱戴他，就像北坤刚才说的，士兵们忠于他超过了忠于国家，然后他们给自己的亲人啊家属啊就是写信要求他们就是选举这个马略当执政官，就是靠着这些士兵和他们家属的支持，然后马略就当选了7次执政官，应该是对吧
？7 times. Yeah. So Marius really improved the whole army thing, because back then, first of all, there would be a separate team to get the resources there, like the food and others. But now he made everybody carry their own stuff so they could train. And even if there's no war, they had to train as well, because they can't just slack off. Also, the soldiers had to get their own weapons. So if you're like a poor person, the most you could afford might be like a stone stick, or maybe you could take some farming stuff. You can take a hoe, you can take maybe like a pitchfork. If you're like on the wealthier side, you might be able to afford a shield, a sword, maybe a spear. However, Marius really added and gave them, basically improved their army's weapons. He gave them all spears, swords, shields, so nobody would have a stick in battle. And also his army was really loyal to him. They even got the nickname Marius's mules, symbolizing how mules can do a lot of work and always loyal. But despite that, they still won a lot of wars and was known as the elite army of the Romans. So now after Marius, sort of after this whole conflict and after Sulla stepped down from his consulship, there was a small revolt. Well, we couldn't really say small. So let's say, here's a question for everyone. What is the first Roman structure that comes to mind when you think about Rome? What's the first structure? Brian?
I forget what it's called. It's on the tip of my tongue, but then it's like the place where the gladiators fight. I forgot what it's called.
Yeah, you basically got the place right. All right, and E?
A giant statue of Julius Caesar.
Oh yeah, that's a nice one. Well, okay, Brian got it right. It's the Colosseum. And so one of their favorite sports is to bet. One of their favorite events and hobbies is to watch people fight, like gladiators fighting gladiators, gladiators fighting lions, and etc. And now we're gonna see one of the greatest revolts of the gladiators, led by Spartacus. I'll explain more in detail after this video, but for now, enjoy.
As the warrior slept, a snake coiled around his face. Instead of a threat, his wife saw an omen, a fearsome power that would lead her husband to either glory or doom. For now, however, he was only a slave, one of millions taken from the territories conquered by Rome to work the mines, till the fields, or fight for the crowd's entertainment. A nomadic Thracian from what is now Bulgaria, he had served in the Roman army but was imprisoned for desertion. His name was Spartacus. Spartacus had been brought to Capua by Batiatus, a lanista, or trainer of gladiators, and life at the ludus, or gladiator school, was unforgiving. New recruits were forced to swear an oath to be burned, to be bound, to be beaten, and to be killed by the sword, and to obey their master's will without question. But even harsh discipline couldn't break Spartacus's spirit. In 73 BCE, Spartacus led 73 other slaves to seize knives and skewers from the kitchen and fight their way out, hijacking a wagon of gladiator equipment along the way. They were done fighting for others. Now, they fought for their freedom. When the news reached Rome, the Senate was too busy with wars in Spain and the Pontic Empire to worry about some unruly slaves. Unconcerned, Praetor Claudius Glaber took an army of 3,000 men to the rebels' refuge at Mount Vesuvius and blocked off the only passage up the mountain. All that remained was to wait and starve them out, or so he thought. In the dead of night, the rebels lowered themselves down the cliffside on ropes made from vines and flanked Glaber's unguarded camp. Thus began the legend of Rome's defiant gladiator. As news of the rebellion spread, its ranks swelled with escaped slaves, deserting soldiers, and hungry peasants. Many were untrained, but Spartacus's clever tactics transformed them into an effective guerrilla force. A second Roman expedition led by Praetor Varinius was ambushed while the officer bathed. To elude the remaining Roman forces, the rebels used their enemies' corpses as decoy guards, stealing Varinius's own horse to aid their escape. Thanks to his inspiring victories and policy of distributing spoils equally, Spartacus continued attracting followers and gained control of villages where new weapons could be forged. The Romans soon realized they were no longer facing ragtag fugitives, and in the spring of 72 BCE, the Senate retaliated with the full force of 2 legions. The rebels left victorious, but many lives were lost in the battle, including Spartacus's lieutenant, Crixus. To honor him, Spartacus held funeral games, forcing his Roman prisoners to play the role his fellow rebels had once endured. By the end of 72 BCE, Spartacus's army was a massive force of roughly 120,000 members, but those numbers proved difficult to manage. With the path to the Alps clear, Spartacus wanted to march beyond Rome's borders, where his followers would be free. But his vast army had grown brash. Many wanted to continue pillaging, while others dreamed of marching on Rome itself. In the end, the rebel army turned south, foregoing what would be their last chance at freedom. Meanwhile, Marcus Licinius Crassus had assumed control of the war. As Rome's wealthiest citizen, he pursued Spartacus with 8 new legions, eventually trapping the rebels in the toe of Italy. After failed attempts to build rafts and a stinging betrayal by local pirates, the rebels made a desperate run to break through Crassus's lines. But it was no use. Roman reinforcements were returning from the Pontic Wars, and the rebels' ranks and spirits were broken. In 71 BCE, they made their last stand. Spartacus nearly managed to reach Crassus before being cut down by centurions. His army was destroyed, and 6,000 captives were crucified along the Appian Way, a haunting demonstration of Roman authority. Crassus won the war, but it is not his legacy which echoes through the centuries. Thousands of years later, the name of the slave who made the world's mightiest empire tremble has become synonymous with freedom and the courage to fight for it.
Yeah. And there was one thing about this video. It's completely right, but there was another side to it. You see, even though it was Crassus who cut off Spartacus's head and ended the final blow, it was actually Pompey who had gotten rid of the remaining forces, his whole army. And this is the first time we will probably be introducing 2 of the triumvirate, Pompey and Crassus. You may know them as Caesar's sidekicks, but they're actually not. They have like a whole triangle thing. They were the first triumvirate, basically a 3-man rule, sort of different from the 2 consuls. Before Caesar came, Pompey and Crassus were ruled as consuls because the 2 of them, they were consul for some time. However, they later had an argument about who actually had defeated the whole Spartacus and his gladiator army. And Crassus arguing that he was actually the one landing the final blow on Spartacus himself, but Pompey was saying how he was the one who actually wiped out his forces. So they did have a small disagreement over that, but they soon got over it and started fighting pirates together again. So now we will be introducing the two of the 3 triumvirate before we actually get into Caesar. Pompey was actually, he had similar ideals to Gracchus, but by the time the land thing was already solved, so after some wars, he wanted to give his own soldiers some more money and land, but this to the Senate was a sign of threat, because as I mentioned before, Roman armies are supposed to be loyal to Rome, not the general. So this sort of action, according to Rome, would be seen as trying to bribe the army into becoming his, and basically buying the army for himself, because the army cannot be for a person, it can only be for the country. Mm-hmm. And so the Senate denied his request to give his army some more money in that. And with that, Pompey was very, very angry at the Senate.
庞培其实是很年轻的时候就崭露了头角。他在就像北坤刚才说的，他是在镇压斯巴达叛乱的时候，然后和这个苏拉就是克拉苏共享了这个战功。然后这个时候他是 就是很想为自己的这些战士们就是谋求土地，但是确实像北昆说的，然后元老院会觉得你这是在收买军队，然后庞培在军队当中非常的有威望，大家都非常的爱戴他，所以说这个元老院对他就很担心他走向独裁，变成一个君主。大家知道罗马共和国，我们以前在讲罗马共和国的时候曾经说过，大家对这种重新有一个皇帝，或者是重新有一个国王，然后有独裁者，是感到非常恐惧的，然后他们是非常敏感的，所以说他们就故意的压制他的这种声望。
Very sensitive to people, like especially one person in charge. They're okay with dictators because they're temporary. But we'll see. But Caesar kind of crossed that line when he was no longer a temporary ruler.
对，所以说在庞培打海盗战争的时候，其实元老院就一直非常的担心说啊，我给了你权力，你会不会不还回来？但是后来庞培还是把这些权力都还回来了。但是庞培他在东方作战嘛，在东方的时候，东方很多地方因为很爱戴他，就给他铸造了很多钱币，钱币上面有他的头像。但是在罗马的传统是你活着从来没有活着的人，然后是在钱币上拥有自己头像的，他们觉得这是一种非常怎么说呢，就是非常 sensitive 的一个事情，所以说他们对庞培有这种担忧。
Yeah. And Crassus. Okay, let's move on from Pompey. Crassus, you guys may know, he is a very rich man, probably the richest man in Rome. Yeah. Man knows to get some money, but he actually does get a lot of money. But even though he uses many methods to get money, including like lending money and then basically asking for more money back and interest in return, but he is still a very popular person among citizens. He invites people to dine in his backyard and like look at how rich he is, flex off that richness. But he does greet normal people, citizens, and he is generally pretty nice to everybody.
对，克拉苏这个人非常的贪婪，然后他曾经在苏拉清洗政敌的时候，把一些有钱人的名字就加在上头，然后趁着清洗的时候就把那些人的钱财通过没收就捞到了自己的钱包里头。他是一个贵族，他不方便进行这种就是放贷的这种事情，但是他就委托自己的奴隶，让自己的奴隶已经释放了的奴隶去开银行，然后去那个借贷钱财，然后就积攒了大量的钱。但他确实很大方，就像北昆说的，他会把自己的院子都全打开，然后欢迎大家，经常就举办宴会，随时就是你不用接受他的邀请，就是随时进去吃就可以了。所以大家还是挺喜欢他的，随时吃。
He tries everything to get a lot of money, but he does good stuff with this money. But the two of them right now can't do much stuff with just their power. They needed other stuff, and now we're gonna finally get into the main topic of this presentation, Caesar. So before we start, what are some things you guys know that you would like to share that you guys know about Caesar so far? Any like facts that you know about Caesar? Not any.
Caesar pizza?
No, not Little Caesar.
It's delicious.
I know, right?
Well, aside from the fact that people name stuff after it.
Jessica.
He was an amazing military general.
Yes, that he was. He was very amazing. During his short, like, here's something I want to point out. He actually only. Okay, I'll point it out later.
Wait, I have one. He was someone very important.
Yeah, he was.
Brian.
Caesar was assassinated.
And you?
Caesar died a dramatic death.
Yeah, I guess. Most important people die dramatic deaths because we kind of copy their dying breaths word for word and we put them on documents and we write stories about them. But maybe some of them are exaggerated. Caesar was pretty, like the first time I heard his death, I heard that he had died at the feet of Pompey and his and he was like, "Oh, I die at your feet." Or something, but that might have been exaggerated because many people, especially historians, believe that his final words were something else, which we will talk about later once we get to that, which is at the very end. So Caesar is we can say he's also a prodigy, just like Marcius. And if you're wondering where the genes come from, Marcius is his uncle-in-law. Marcius married Caesar's aunt. And so,
Caesar 本来马略这个家庭背景是没法娶到 Caesar 的姑姑的，因为 Caesar 他们家是
the Julius family was very rich.
对，不是 rich， 是最古老，是罗马最古老的一个家族，所以那个追溯到那个就是艾涅阿斯的那个时代，但是到这个时候。他们家已经变得很穷了，只能住在贫民区，所以说他们
They can only live in the slum area, but their bloodline was
but luckily， 然后他的姑姑和马略结婚了，所以说 Caesar 也终于凭借这个关系，然后就走出了贫民窟。
He married Cornelia Cinna, which was somebody that he wasn't supposed to marry because she was also pretty more high sass than him. And later, because Cornelia was more on Marcius's side of the whole Marcius via Sulla argument, Sulla tried to forcefully separate those two, and Caesar was very stubborn about it, and they almost got into a fight. But many of the people had talked them out of it. Yeah. And Caesar, using his connection with his wife, became the priest of the temple of Jupiter, which was his dream job, to become the priest of the temple of Jupiter, because that's probably one of the biggest temples and very respected job. So he became a priest. And yeah, so he also learned a lot about war stuff.
但是这个工作后来因为他拒绝跟他的妻子离婚，也被那个cancel掉了。
He lost his job after he refused to divorce. Yeah, that's one story about Caesar. There's another story which is quite popular, in which Caesar was on a ship that was hijacked by pirates, and then Caesar was being arrogant and is like, if you want to take anybody, take me, because I am worth a lot of money, which he was at the time because he had a job, he had connections and such. And he said, but if you take me, but you better leave the ship alone, because if you take me, and then once I get money that you'll let me go, because they had this hostage scenes in movies, give me 500,000 or she gets it. So basically, the whole thing was they wanted money, and hostages don't really have any use to them except for getting money. So they wanted to get some rich person's kid to be their hostage, and Caesar was a really good pick for them. So once they received their money, Caesar was let go. But before that, he told them that I will come back and hunt you down. In which he did. He came back soon with the whole fleet and completely annihilated the pirates. Now, there is actually two endings to this story. One in which the first one would be more kid-friendly. Any?
Did he get his money back?
Yeah, well, he kind of, I don't know. Maybe the pirates spent it. Maybe he had gotten some money back from the pirates after he defeated them.
Okay.
Now, the first version of the story is more kid-friendly, and it's also probably more like Caesar, which is more possible to be true. So the first version is in which Caesar captures them, and then they're like, oh, kill me if you must. But then Caesar says, I will give you money and set you free. So now we can be So now we can be best friends and you guys will fight alongside me and we will be brothers. That is very like Caesar. As we may know, he likes to spare his enemies. That will give him a good reputation, and also he is just that type of person. Now the second ending, we don't have to go into detail because the second detail is in which he tortured them and crucified them. And yeah, that may have not been the real Caesar, because Caesar probably doesn't act like that. You may know once we get to later. That's basically the youth Caesar over, and soon he will become one of the triumvirate. And okay, maybe this should have came later, but as you may know, Caesar was a very famous conqueror. This picture doesn't have, we're not talking about like what war he won in this picture. We're not talking about any of the wars. We're just talking about how he triumphs, how he shows off how he won. So this is Triumphs of Caesar C9 by Andrea Mantegna.
Caesar 的，大家可以看到，然后在 Caesar 的后面站着一个小孩儿，看起来好像很体面的样子，但是实际上他是一个奴隶。在这种仪式上面，就会经常会有一个奴隶要在这些将军的面前说你要记住，你永远只是一个凡人，就是为了提醒他们要记住自己，不要让自己那个膨胀到把自己以为是一个神。对，然后凯撒这个话讲的是凯撒的这个凯旋礼，这种凯旋礼很像我们现在的就是花车游行，他就是把自己打了胜仗之后，然后就把那些战利品啦，然后还有那些俘虏啊。战利品装在车上，然后俘虏呢就在前面走，然后就是展示他在这些战争当中他拿到了多少的拿到了多少的钱，取得了多少的战功。可能对胜利者来说是一种非常强的那种荣耀感，所有的人因为全罗马的人都会出来了围观啊，我们的那个将军又得到了多少的东西啊，很骄傲。但是对于这个失败的人来说是非常非常屈辱的，你就在前面像那个动物一样被展示。所以说后来Cleopatra 就是也不愿他就是不愿意被这样当做这个凯旋仪式上的展示，然后才自杀的嘛，就是这样子。
So these triumph parades were just like our modern day parades, except to the people that are walking it, they're not exactly very happy except for the conqueror. So this was a giant thing that people come and watch as the general sits in a wagon with a bunch of gold and riches and all the stuff they got from the conquest dragging behind them, with all the slaves they got walking in front. Now, the general may be like very happy, like, oh my God, I'm so good. But they have like this slave here standing beside him, basically telling him and reminding him that no matter how much you do, you are not a god, you are just a human. And this is because for many people, it gets to their head, they conquer a few cities, they feel invincible, and that soon leads to their downfall, which was also Caesar's downfall. So now, people in this parade aren't happy either, and that is why Cleopatra later committed suicide, because she did not want to be put in this parade while many people look, because everybody from Rome is watching as the slaves, the losing side, are put there, which is kind of a miserable sight. All right, and now we have the triumvirate, Pompey, Crassus, and Caesar. This was the first triumvirate. We had many others, but none had as much impact on their countries as these three did. So Pompey had power from the Senate, Crassus had money, and Caesar had, he could fight really well. So the
Caesar 他们三个是军队的力量，然后最 最庞大的财富，和站在前方的这个凯撒，他代表的这种政治上的权利，他们是这种结合。他们达成的协议就是凯撒在政治的舞台前面，然后剩下的2个人在后面，然后跟他说，我们要通过什么什么议案，然后由他作为执政官去提出并执行。
Yeah, so Caesar was put as a consul, and those two, they weren't like it wasn't very, they couldn't really just express what they want. So they had Caesar say it for them, and so they could actually get what they want. The changes can be made. And now this was a very functional triangle, but it would soon fall apart. But before we say that, let's check out their bonds. For example, Caesar's daughter is married to Pompey, and Pompey is 6 years older than Caesar. So now that would probably be frowned down upon, but they were actually very loving. And that was also a very strengthening bond between Pompey and Caesar that basically forced them to not having conflicts. So right now our whole triangle is very secure. But soon Caesar's daughter died and Crassus died as well.
他是克拉苏是在一次战役当中不幸战死了，然后他们这个三角形的就失去了一个角，变成了这样了，这样它就像一个跷跷板一样，他们俩的对立就不可避免了。
Yeah, so Crassus died, and
How did he die?
He fought in war and died.
对，他是在一个战争中，然后他就去世了。对
Yeah.
那就阵亡了，真是一个不幸的
So
事情。
right now our triangle, okay. So our triangle is kind of just. So now there was like 2 major people keeping that were in the middle of Pompey and Caesar. It's not like they would naturally have a conflict, but it's just as time goes on, there is bound to have things that make you disagree. And there has to be people to stop that disagreement, such as Crassus or Caesar. Sorry, but once they both died, as time went on, they would basically fall apart.
其实庞培和克拉苏的关系原来不太好，大家刚才我们也讲到过，他们在那个奴隶战争里头的时候，因为争功这件事情嘛，可能互相有一点不高兴。但是庞培和凯撒的关系原来是挺好的，然后凯撒把女儿嫁给他的时候，还跟自己的女儿说：“你嫁过去吧。”然后这个家伙可是个好人呢。
He's a good man.
Yeah, he's a
even
good
though
man.
he's so much older than you.
对，但是后来可能就是他的这个妻子就是庞培的妻子，也就是凯撒的女儿去世之后呢，他们俩中间这种交流的通道可能就断掉了，所以有一些误会也没有及时的解除吧。就像元老院然后怀疑庞培会走向独裁一样，庞培后来也怀疑那个这个凯撒会走向独裁，其实这些都是有原因的。凯撒的这个在高卢战役中，一会儿北空会讲到他的高卢战役当中取得了巨大的战功，然后他是第一个在罗马把自己的头像铸在罗马的，还活着的时候把自己的头像铸在罗马上的钱币上面的人。反正就是，而且他要求他把自己的这个独裁官任期原来说过只能是半年，然后1年。他把自己的这个苏拉当了3年吧，苏拉是3年吗？但是庞培对那个凯撒把这个独裁官的职位延长成了终身独裁官，这对那个罗马人来说是一个非常大的一个刺激。
Yeah. So just like how the Senate had suspected Pompey of going towards like the king, the emperor sort of role, Pompey also had suspected that Caesar will also go towards the same thing. And that was shown later. I'll talk about the coins later, but normal dictators, they can't be for that time. The whole point of a dictator not being a king or emperor is that it's temporary. But after Caesar was named dictator again and again, and then he was put as 10 years, and then he even requested for him to be dictator for life. People got really sensitive to that because being dictator for life, that's just a king. There is no difference except that he did not become that. He was killed before then. So now Caesar was sent out to, do all the fighting stuff. And there was a big conflict between Rome and Gaul that we will soon talk about.
Since they heard that he would be a dictator for life, they probably wanted to end his life earlier.
So he could have been dictator for life, but maybe that for life would have been just like 1 year. All right, so this picture is Vercingetorix. Gaul names, throws down his arms at the feet of Julius Caesar. But Noel Royer. Basically, Caesar within a few years had conquered so much Gallic tribes, like probably a few hundred Gallic tribes in a very short amount of time. And this painting depicts towards the end of him conquering Gaul, like he was close to cleaning up. Vercingetorix was a very great Gaul leader, and then they surrendered to Caesar. Of course, he kept some alive. He kept most of them alive, but just reformed them into Romans. That was always what Rome had done. If you guys go back all the way to the beginning, Rome and Sabine, they had combined as well, Rome and Sabine. Rome likes to absorb their enemies, not take them and make them into slaves and sell them. Well, they would sometimes do that, but most of them like to absorb them into their own. So Rome would expand. And that was something that made Rome really great. And that was also what Caesar did to some of the Gallic tribes. He then Pompey got like really scared that he would, with his power that's going to his head, his giant armies, he got kind of scared and demanded Caesar to come back with just himself, not his army. And Caesar knew that something bad was going to happen. So he actually did bring his army. And now there's this thing called the Rubicon River. Have you ever heard of an idiom called crossing the Rubicon? I don't think you guys have. So crossing the Rubicon, this idiom means crossing the point of no return. And before he did that, Caesar, quote, did the die is cast, meaning that he can't change anything, so might as well get this over with. There was this rule back in Rome. There was this giant river called Rubicon, and you cannot bring any weapons, any armor past this point, or armies for that instance. But Caesar did that, and he crossed the point of no return. Pompey was forced to retaliate with a military force almost very bigger than Caesar's. However, because Caesar's armies had actually been out there and fighting, they were actually more skilled than Pompey's numbers, quality over quantity. And so with that, he sent Pompey packing and running to Egypt, where the Egyptian king wanted to save him, but also was fearful of Caesar. So he killed Pompey and showed Caesar his head. You guys want to guess how Caesar rewarded him? How did Caesar reward the Egyptian king?
Brian.
Did he kill him?
Not.
Annie.
If he didn't kill him, then it would be like he rewarded him with like either another person's head or like gold or land.
Mm-hmm. Well, we can't really trust a single source, but some people say that he was very angry at the Egyptian king, so he did not give him anything. Because Julius Caesar, his personality is he would like to spare people because that's just how he does things. He likes to spare people. That makes him a really gracious person. And there was even like an idiom saying that he was as kind and as merciful as Caesar.
庞培既是他的对手，其实也是他的朋友。我觉得这种感情很复杂吧。他
It's like more of a rival.
不能接受别人庞培别人 kill 掉。
He was more of a rival than an arch enemy. Enemy. Yeah. All right. So some say that he had killed the Egyptian king. Some say that he just left. Like, I don't want to see you again. He also, at the time, he also put Cleopatra in charge along with the king, and that king later died, and Cleopatra's brother was also put with her. But then,
对，一般来说的话，主流的媒体还是认为他是不是媒体，就是主要的那个历史学家还是认为他是他非常不高兴，然后但是他就宣布他的那个埃及由托勒密13世和 Cleopatra 然后共同治理，然后这个事情呢，但是 Cleopatra 但是那个托勒密13世并不愿意这样，他想自己当国王，就爆发了亚历山大港战役，这次战役倒是不太重要，因为就是很快就结束了，但是发生了一件特别不幸的事情，就是亚历山大城有著名的那个图书馆，不小心凯撒的那个士兵放了一个火的那种带火的那种箭，然后把那个图书馆里的书都给烧了，就非常非常的遗憾。
Yeah, so they had a small war. It wasn't very significant, but in the city of Alexandria, basically, that was like the time. This city was established way back during Alexander the Great's time in Macedonia. So, but shameful thing is that one of the archers on, one of the soldiers on Caesar's side had accidentally set fire to the Great Library. Anyway, now Caesar was named dictator. This is like Caesar's coins. You probably can't get them there free. So we did talk about this, so we'll just skim through this. Caesar was named dictator. He requested for even more time. So that kind of made him very sensitive. Yeah, so dictators are kind of just like emergency powers. So we're going to watch a short clip on Star Wars, in which Chancellor Palpatine was given emergency powers, and that was very, very like a dictator.
It's a clear he's a separatist made a pact. He said he's a federation betrayed. Senator Jello Belligan, in response to this direct threat to the Republic, Misa proposed that the Senate give immediately emergency powers to the Supreme Chancellor.
Order! We shall have order!
It is with great reluctance that I have agreed to this calling. I love democracy. I love the Republic. The power you give me, I will lay down when this crisis has abated. And as my first act with this new authority, I will create a grand army of the Republic to counter the increasing threats of the Separatists.
It is done, then. I will take what Jedi we have left and go to Geonosis and help Obi-Wan.
Visit, I will, the cloners on Camino. And see this army they have created for the Republic.
Yep. So let's say Star Wars is actually very similar, but we will move on. We won't be talking about how similar exactly they are. So now, of course, this is a very famous event in history of Rome in which Caesar, he was given many bad omens the whole day, but he decided to ignore them. And when he was summoned by the Senate, he went not suspecting a thing. And of course, the senators had gathered up and had ambushed them. He was stabbed 20 something times, 23, 24, before dying. And his final words, or that we can guess from historians, were "Et tu, Brutus." So there was, I have a theory about Caesar's downfall, which is he was too merciful. Even though it was a good thing, even though he spared his enemies, some of his enemies hadn't forgave him. So he left alive a lot of his enemies, such as Brutus. He wasn't exactly an enemy, but he disapproved of dictators because he was along the family of the original Lucius Brutus, the guy who had made the Roman Republic. So their family was very strict about the Republic, about like no kings, no emperors. So even though he had been like really opposing to Caesar, he had forgiven him again and again, but in the end, it was still Brutus who had majorly contributed to killing him. He had also blocked any way the plan was leaked out. Somebody tried to inform Mark Antony, another famous Roman general, from telling Caesar, but that person was also blocked by Brutus. So this is the assassination of Caesar by Vincenzo Camuccini.
对，我们下一节课会讲到凯撒死后的事情，大家可以提前想一想，这些人刺杀了凯撒，自以为保护了共和国，但是罗马人民会感谢他们吗？这是我们下一节课的第一个问题，我们现在不用回答，我们下一节课的时候可以回答一下。接下来我们看一段小小的视频，也正是这个凯撒蒸高炉这个背景之下的一个动画片，这也是非常有名的一个 animation， 是法国的国宝级的这个动画片，大家可以回头也可以找来看一下。
We watched the live action version in the beginning, and now we will watch the original cartoon version.
Not once did I even sprain an ankle, not once. From now on, I cannot be the only one to know the formula to the magic potion.
What?
I will set forth in search of a young successor that I can entrust it to.
What?
This is a disaster, Obelix.
Who knows what'll happen if the magic potion falls into the wrong hands?
Get a fix?
Can you think of a list of young druids in Gaul with a good reputation?
I think we keep crib notes somewhere.
Crib notes?
Teeny little cribby wibby, so cute.
I won't tell if you don't.
And of course, the ultimate lame brains couldn't cook up an onion soup to save their lives.
Now, these guys are pretty worthless, but they still manage a trick or two.
In the Carnage Forest, I'm known as Magnetics.
These are all straight A's. Go easy on the swagger.
Hail Caesar. This potion, I can bring it to you.
The potion of the wackos?
Up to your old tricks, Demonix!
Tonight marks the end of these mustachioed morons. The end of Asterix.
I pour this one into that one.
You think you're a druid?
Can't be that much harder than being a fishmonger.
Attack! No, Obelix, pass!
All these beards. Which one do I want? What are you adding that for? Same thing happens every time.
This one's different. Buy 10. If it hasn't exploded, then we're safe. 1.
If you're as good a druid as a fishmonger, we should sell tickets.
So, what's up, you big tub of lard? Check out your tongue. Squawk! I'll show you who's the man. Guess it's worn off now. Well, best things come to an end and all that. Nice chatting with you.
Yep. So for some background, this is about how this sort of like after the main Gallic Wars, there was just one Gallic tribes that wasn't conquered, and because they had this really magical potion that would make them very strong. It's a very fun and funny cartoon. If you guys want to watch it, you guys can watch it.
对，高卢战争其实是我们说了很少，但是其实是非常残酷的战争，双方都是非常惨烈吧。然后凯撒在高卢大概屠杀了100万人左右，所以说后来的人称他为种族灭绝者，这也是非常可怕的。当然高卢人也不是吃素的，也是非常厉害，他们曾经把罗马士兵然后大卸8块或者是什么的，都挺残忍的。古代战争就是这个样子，没有什么人道主义。然后我们可能看见战争大家都会觉得哎很有兴趣，好像这些将军们多么的厉害。但是如果我们带入到普通人的角度来看的话，战争是非常残酷的。我们还是希望世界和平 ，Love and Peace。OK， 那我们今天就到这里，好不好
？Yeah, and that is it for today.
我们下周再见。下周的话，因为我们要去远处参加一个比赛，所以说下周我们休假1周，然后。